the core beliefs that we practice with internally, this is where I want to go, the way we dissolve the veil of them require a really committed attention. And this is where the work internally has a lot of bravery to it, because there's many layers that are involved. Sri Nisargadatta, a really great non-dual teacher, said, illusion exists because it's not investigated. So let's look at how we examine our beliefs, because this is the last piece that I really want to explore with you here. And I think what I'd like to do is share with you a story of how one person I worked with did it that used the basic strategies of mindful investigation. And this was a man who came in and he had been priming himself with alcohol and cocaine to get through all the meetings and social gatherings that were part of his work. He was a lobbyist. But when he came to see me, the president of the trade association and his wife both said, if you don't stop, if you don't go to a 12-step program, you're out of the marriage and out of the job. So he came to me in quite a state because he was really angry about feeling others were controlling him. He was rebellious, but mostly he was afraid. He was about to lose everything. Okay, so that's where he came from. So I did what I did with you. I had him go into the situation and say, okay, where and what are you feeling in your body? And he felt fear, and it was like knots in his stomach. Then I asked him just what I asked you. I said, if you could just go inside that place of fearful knots, what's the view of the world from that place? In other words, what are you believing? Okay? And for him, that place believed that, he said, it believes I'm a failure, and anyone that finds out how weak I am won't respect me or like me. Okay? And in time we could look at and see where did that come from. Well, he had been bullied and shamed both by his alcoholic father and his older brother. He grew up outside of Buenos Aires. And he said, I wasn't like my brother, big and loud. I liked books, and even as a kid, and I didn't like to fight. So in front of his whole neighborhood, his father would call me una niña, a girl. It was the worst when he was drinking. So anyway, he built up a persona. He built his muscles, and he pretended to be tough, and he used drugs and alcohol to help him feel more protected, more safe. So that was the setup. And that's what he found out about the beliefs that he had. So then we came into a more active inquiry about them. And I asked him to pay attention again, go into his body. And I asked him how it felt to believe what he believed, that he was unworthy. This is the next step. You sense, okay, so what am I believing? And then, well, what's it like to believe that? What's it like to believe I'm flawed? Or that around the corner it's going to be too much, or that no one will love me, or that I'll never have intimacy. What's it like to believe that? And then you start tapping into really the layers that are there. For him, I'm ashamed, I feel totally alone, and then that shame and loneliness feels very old. So he started tapping into the feelings underneath the belief. And then at the bottom there was a deep hollowness. He said, it's like I've been building my abs for years to cover this hole. So as he spoke, he was kind of making circles right around his belly. He said, it's huge. It's this black hole that's pulled in my heart and everything else. So I had him then, as we do with the meditation practice, just bring a gentle presence to that, to feeling that hole, to feeling the ache, the hollowness. And I said, let it be as large as it really is, and just stay present. So again, this is not a complicated thing on one level. He's just staying with what comes up. Here's the belief. Here's the feelings under it. Stay with it. Stay with it. And as he stayed with it, he could sense how this unworthiness had affected every relationship in his life. It stopped him from being close to anyone. And so I just had him breathe with that intensity. And in staying with it, and this is, to me, the blessing of mindfulness, and just staying with the feeling of the hollowness and the ache and the shame, and breathing and offering presence, he started sensing more space around it. He started sensing that who he was the space of awareness that was observing and feeling what was there. His identity started shifting. He just stayed with it for a number of minutes, and when he opened his eyes, there was more brightness in it. He said the pain was there, it spread, but then it started dissolving, and now it's gone. That doesn't mean it didn't come back, but for those moments of mindfulness, he really sensed some space. Then I asked another question, and this is one just to, if you really begin to pose this question to yourself, it's very powerful. What would it be like to live without this belief? What would your life be like? This is what I asked him. What would it be like to live without the belief that you're weak and unworthy? Because we can get a glimmer. There's some wisdom that can sense the freedom outside of it. I asked him, who would you be if you didn't believe this? It's a deep question. It's a powerful one. Who would you be if you didn't believe you were unworthy? Or you didn't believe that life was too much to handle around the corner? Or you didn't believe that you'd never be intimate with anyone? Who would you be? His response, I don't know who I would be, he said, but somehow not knowing feels good, like all of a sudden there's space and I'm more alive. And then he said, what's clear is if I didn't believe I was unworthy, I could relax here. He gestured towards his heart. And he said, and then I could trust that Marcella, that's his wife, really does care. I could trust enough to tell her the truth, that I love her. Now I want to pause here. Our beliefs stop us from expressing love. We're afraid. They stop us from letting love in. We're afraid. So what he was saying is that as he started to explore it, if I didn't believe in that, I could actually express the truth of who I am. And I come back to what that palliative caregiver said, that we spend so many days of our life not living true to ourselves, living according to the expectations that others have of us. And the internalized expectations, which is, I can't afford to be vulnerable and loving because I might be rejected. Or I might get suffocated. I might not be able to handle the beliefs. So I wanted to share this with you because it's, in its details, because it's, to me, a beautiful example of real but not true. That for this man, he started finding over and over again as he investigated that he really believed he was unworthy, but the more that he brought his presence to it, the more he could find a place of compassion and presence. And he went back to, he continued work, he went to 12-step program. When he came back a month later, I want to share this with you because it was so interesting. He said, when the urge to have a drink resurfaced, he said, I have a way of dealing with it that is pretty powerful. He said, I heard a prayer at our 12-step meeting that another man uses, and it's perfect for my life. Not my will, but my heart's will. Not my will. My will being all the ways that our ego and our beliefs kind of drive us down certain tracks. Not my will, but my heart's will. That which is larger and deeper. That's really the divine in us that's guiding us. Not my will, but my heart's will. My will is compelling and familiar. The way we move through the day, the decisions we make, what I sometimes call the controller, the ego's executive director, it's the controller is making decisions based on old and fear-based beliefs of how others are going to respond to us. We don't take a chance. We're not free to be creative or spontaneous. My will is very familiar, compelling, and somewhat safe. My heart's will is scary. We're not sure who we are when we're just going with what really matters. We had a group on Monday, the Monday monthly satsang, and one person just said it was so beautiful. It's just like, if I went ahead and let in love or express myself, I wouldn't really know how to behave. I wouldn't know who I was anymore. It puts us in this completely uncharted territory when instead of doing life according to our habitual expectations and others' expectations and the old fear-based beliefs, we ask that question, well, what if I didn't believe that anymore? This world opens up. And it can be a little jarring, scary, and fundamentally filled with mystery and possibility. Okay, last piece. I've been talking about some of the deep beliefs that are very personal and difficult, but I also want to name some of the pervasive beliefs, especially in our contemporary culture, that keep us from living true to ourselves. And these are more in the genre of, there's not enough time. How many of you have that belief in the background as you move through the day? There's not enough time. Okay. I'm not there yet. I'm on my way somewhere else. This isn't the moment that matters, so I can't really stop and hang out here. Does that feel familiar? That tumbling into the future? That I need to do more, be more, have more, something's missing, there's a problem to solve? I'm just giving you a feeling of the So we speed along the surface, on our way somewhere else, because we have these beliefs that we're not there and we have to do more and we're not having enough time to do it in. And what happens when we're speeding along the surface? This is the trance. This is when we're still in that cave, that virtual reality, and not really living and breathing in the daylight. I want to remind you of a wonderful article that every time I reflect on this, it actually is valuable to me. It's a wake up. So here we are, 2007, cold January morning, right here in Washington, D.C., in a metro station. And there's about 2,000 people that are going through this station. And after about 3 minutes, a middle-aged man notices a musician playing. He slows down a pace, stops for a few seconds, and then he hurries to meet his schedule. And it goes on like this. 4 minutes later, the violinist received his first dollar. A woman threw the money in as she was racing on. 6 minutes later, a young man leaned against the wall to listen to him, then looked at his watch and started to walk again. 10 minutes later, a 3-year-old boy stopped, but his mother tugged him along hurriedly. The kid stopped to look at the violinist again, but again the mother pushed hard, and the child continued to walk, turning his head all the time. This action was repeated by several other children. Every time parents, without exception, forced their children to move on quickly. 45 minutes, well, this goes on, an hour. He finished playing, silence took over, no one noticed, no one applauded, nor was there any recognition. So the violinist was Joshua Bell. I know many of you know this story. He's one of the greatest musicians in the world. He played one of the most intricate pieces ever written with a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before, Joshua Bell had sold at a theater in Boston where the average seats were $100 each. Okay, true story. This happened in the metro. And it was organized by the Washington Post. It was part of a social experiment about perception and people's priorities. So it raised this question, if you have a commonplace environment, is it possible to perceive beauty? Is it possible to live the moments when we think we're on our way somewhere? And how often are we on our way somewhere else? To getting a project done, to crossing something off our list, to getting to the vacation or the meal or whatever. How many moments are not really lived? This is the poet Hafez. He says, "What is the difference between your experience of existence and that of a saint? The saint knows that the spiritual path is a sublime chess game with God, and that the beloved has just made such a fantastic move that the saint is now continually tripping over joy and bursting out in laughter and saying, "I surrender." Whereas, my dear, I'm afraid you still think you have 1,000 serious moves. So we're going to end with a reflection, and just to say that tonight is really, how do we take refuge in truth? How do we see past the veil of limiting beliefs? As the poem says, you wake, you stumble from your cave, blinking in the sun, naming every shadow as it slips. How do we investigate these beliefs that keep us in the cave? So as you set yourself for this final little reflection, just close your eyes and take a moment again to feel yourself right here, wherever you are, in this room on this Wednesday night here, or as you're listening to a podcast, or in this country, in another country. Just discover here-ness with your breath, this moment. And feel what you might call your love for truth. That in you which is committed to knowing what's real and true, and living from your truth. And you might again sense the situation where you get caught in the difficult emotions. Let it be close up to you right now. Let the situation be real. You can sense the worst part of it. Maybe what you're afraid is going to happen. What you don't trust. What's wrong. And with a gentleness and a dedication to truth, just ask yourself, what am I believing? Again, sense what you've been concluding about yourself, about what's possible. How have you limited possibility? What are you believing that you should be doing different, or somebody else should be doing different? What are you believing that's creating fear, hurt, anger? You might just ask yourself, is it true? Is it really true? And sense if there's at least an opening to the possibility that there's a larger truth. You might ask yourself, what's the effect of believing this? How does believing this affect my body? Again, this is something you can continue to investigate on your own, but just to touch into that. What are you, when you're believing this, what's your body feel like? And if you've been believing this for a long time, how has it affected your relationships in your life, your work, your capacity to enjoy the moment? And if you can sense how much this belief has squeezed your life, taken life moments, you might sense a natural compassion, just a sadness. Sadness is when the heart starts getting moist. You might just offer presence to that. And with some openness and interest, to ask yourself, what would my life be like without this belief? Who would I be without this belief? Those are two different but related questions. Just to get a glimmer. What would my life be if I didn't believe this? How would my day be? My way of being with others? Can you get a little bit of a sense of the freedom and possibility? Who would I be? Would we know who we are? Closing with the words of Rumi. I am water. I'm the thorn that catches someone's clothing. There's nothing to believe. Only when I quit believing in myself did I come into this beauty. Day and night I guarded the pearl of my soul. Now in this ocean of purling currents, I've lost track of which was mine. Day and night I guarded the pearl of my soul. Now, in this ocean of purling currents, I've lost track of which was mine. Namaste and thank you.